Emma, welcome to an episode of Mind Movers, the mental health podcast for dentists. This is season 2, and we have the incredible Emma Marshall. Emma is the founder and CEO of Movement is Medicine. And when I first met Emma, it was through a friend, and I was drawn to her incredibly vibrant personality, her healing soul. And we continued to stay in touch, and she inspired me because she recognized this huge gap in the market for movement as a method of healing. I'm not talking just about exercise, but moving your body to music, moving your body in any place that you're at, not necessarily being in a rave or at a party with people, and certainly not needing substances to fuel your desire to move your body. She's also been a TEDx speaker. She's been at the Happy Place Festival, which I was also at, and has gone on to do incredible things. And I think what's really exciting is that she's not gone on to do incredible things with what I call the woo-woo culture, but also the corporate society, because she's recognized as well that people should have access to healing and not be boxed up into just being part of a certain type of industry. So welcome, Emma.
Oh, thanks for having me. What a lovely intro.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, Emma, the reason why I found you so inspiring, and I think a lot of people have, is because, you know, you had a series of unfortunate events that had happened to you, which led you to where you were. So let's start from the beginning, what you were doing before Movement is Medicine and how it led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I had a really successful career in the music industry, and everything was going great. You know, I was going from one kind of space in the industry to the other, just figuring out my path in my 20s. But in 2015, I had like a very serious health year where there was just all these different situations that happened back to back. And it wasn't just like, oh, I had the flu. It was like I was hospitalized with some serious conditions. And so one of them, I had to have a catheter because my kidneys weren't functioning properly. And then I got tripped over in the street. I fractured my arm. And I was then diagnosed with like a very serious nervous system disease, which like was all to do with the brain firing off the wrong signals in regards to pain. So I couldn't move the left side of my body. Wow. And it was really, really serious for quite a long time. I was also told with that one that there was no kind of cure, that would be my life. And I was like, nah, don't believe that. But then after that, I had to have my appendix out. Like, and this was all in the space of 6 months. So at that point, I went to a GP and I was just like, there's something wrong with me. You know, I'm only 25, so why is my body not working properly? And the GP kind of just was giving me the fob off of just like, oh, you're probably a bit depressed. And I was a bit like, well, I think there's more to it than that. And that's when I started to look into a more holistic way of understanding health. So I started to look at nutrition. I started to look at my lifestyle. I had burnt myself out. Like, I just got into the music industry at 23, like full time. Before that, I was doing bits and pieces. And I just was doing so many jobs. I wasn't sleeping properly. My diet was poor. And there was so many aspects of my lifestyle that I can understand why that impacted on my health now that obviously I reflected on it. And when we were in those situations, it affects our nervous system, it affects our immune system, it affects our endocrine system. So I really started to observe the ways in which my body was working and how it wasn't, and changed a lot. But I also felt like I never fully recovered. There was always this kind of like missing piece of the jigsaw. And then in 2018, I had to have an operation. It was like something I couldn't have avoided, and it went wrong, and I was put on medication because I thought I was going to go into sepsis, and there was a whole thing. And after that, my body just started to shut down. It just gave up, and I got sicker and sicker, and I got a diagnosis of clinical PTSD. And then it went from there, where the physical symptoms got so extreme that I went to functional medicine. So I looked at functional medicine rather than the NHS. The NHS weren't being particularly helpful. And I was told, oh, we think you've got Lyme disease, or we think you've been poisoned by black mold. And then I went to this hospital in Mexico, raised money, and had some really serious treatment over there. It was really interesting.
What kind of treatment?
Well, so I had ozone therapy, where they take your blood out and then put it back in when it's been oxygenated. And then I also had something called hypothermia, where they put you to sleep and they basically comatose you for like, I think it's around 10 hours. And they basically heat your body up really slowly to a temperature of 109 degrees. And they hold you there for as long as possible to kill off any kind of infections that you've got. Because that's the problem, is that when I got to this hospital, I didn't have Lyme. I did have some sort of, toxin issue, but the problem is that my immune system wasn't working and my nervous system wasn't working and my endocrine system wasn't working. So I had some infections that my body couldn't fight off, bacterial and viral. And then, they just put me through this really serious treatment. But unfortunately, the treatment then resulted in me not being able to walk. So the knock-on effects were huge. And then from there, I started to have seizures. And so it was just this kind of like getting worse and worse and worse. But one of the interesting things that I will mention, because I'm talking to dentists, is that one of the things that they have at this hospital is a biodentist.
Okay.
And the reason being is because they were checking people's teeth. They checked all of my teeth and they were looking for things like fillings, silver fillings and that kind of thing, to look for toxin overload. And I just found that really interesting, because I was just like, oh, okay, cool. There's a whole spectrum of health here that I wouldn't know about this. I had no idea. So it started to just, again, open me up. But I was seriously ill at this point with no kind of resolution and no cure, because that's what I think we look for when we're ill, is like, I need the cure. And there wasn't a clear path. It was just like, we're going to try this and we're going to try that and blah, blah, blah. And I basically ended up carrying on different treatments under like functional medicine for the next year with no improvements. Mm-hmm. It just got worse and worse and worse. And by this point, my mental health was absolutely appalling, like serious PTSD and just, no real will to live, to be honest. And it got to a point where I met somebody and she just kind of transformed my understanding of health, where she was like, you have been through so much trauma, but it's been very physical. We have different types of trauma, and yours has been extremely physical. Your body is going to be holding on to those physical experiences because trauma is held in the body. So you need to start understanding how to work with your body and your nervous system to release this stuff. And it just was like, ding. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. So I dove into the research around the nervous system and neuroscience and the mind-body connection and how everything is connected, and, the gut-brain connection and all these different connections that we have, and how the nervous system impacts your immune system and your endocrine system. And I was like, okay, this is all starting to make a lot more sense. But this is now pandemic time. So there's no resource and no support. I should have 100% have had at least a therapist and also some physio, because when I couldn't walk, it affected my legs. And I had nothing. So I was like, I woke up one day and I just said to myself, like, you've got to start moving. And the only thing that I felt like I could do was dance. And I just promised myself like one song a day. I'd come from the music industry where I was out all the time. I had a lifestyle that incorporated dance most days. I hadn't done this. I hadn't had fun like this in a really long time. So I just started putting on tunes and moving my body. And I started to feel a difference. I started to see improvements in both my physical health, my legs, and also in the way that my anxiety was and PTSD symptoms. And I was just like, okay. So again, furthered the research, and I looked specifically not just around stress and trauma in the body. I looked at dance and movement and even rhythm and certain types of tempos and sound and all that kind of stuff. And I just basically started to piece together all these different aspects. And then at the end of 2020, I decided that London was a bit too much for me, pandemic wise. I'd just been through 2 full years of illness. I was like, I can't do a whole nother year of this. Yeah. So I left and I went back to Mexico, because Mexico was quite open. So went back to Mexico and used the time to not only recover fully, but also study. So I studied how indigenous tribes and communities utilize dance and music all the time. And if you look at anywhere that's got indigenous culture, and that spans across so many different continents, every single aspect of that culture has music and dance incorporated. And we in the West don't particularly utilize it like that. It's very much based around hedonism. So when we go out, it's like, have a drink, and we'll go out, have a drink, and I'll listen to this I'll go to this festival or listen to this concert or whatever. It's always based around hedonism. And in other cultures, that's not necessarily the case. And I just was like, okay, cool. Well, we need to do something here with this, because the science is saying this. The science is saying that dance is extremely helpful, and the nervous system and et cetera, the neuroscience. But also we've just kind of forgotten this very ancient healing practice. So I put something together as a body of work, utilizing the science in particular. And this is where I really didn't want to waste time, but also like make it as a trust me bro situation, which is a lot of wellness. It is that there's no data, there's no science, there's no studies. And I think that there is a place for science and there's also a place for feeling. They both coexist, and that's what I wanted to create, is something that I can say, this is why it works, and now we're going to do it and you're going to feel it. And that's what I've managed to create, and people have really, really taken to it, and it's taken off, and it's done really, really well, and it helps people with everything. But the main thing that it kind of helps people with, most importantly, is just releasing stress.
I love that.
Yeah.
Such a fascinating story, like so many things to say on that. And like one of the things that I want to touch upon, because I think it's really interesting and I want your views on this, is that about alternative medicine, because we work in a profession where we're very much taught traditional medicine. You know, there is a diagnosis to your symptoms and we don't look outside the body. There's also been recently in the press a lot around amalgam fillings, and amalgam fillings, we're one of the last countries now to basically put a stop to it. And obviously a lot of dentist studies have basically shown that actually they don't cause any harm in your body, and they can cause more harm if you remove it in an unsafe way. So like the actual vapor can get inhaled, etc. So you have to use something called the rubber dam, or some dentists use like a kind of extractor machine, etc. And I think now there's been this massive emergence of like biological dentists, and they're actually challenging the status quo and challenging the system. And as you know, she actually one of my dentists, he sort of brands himself as a biological dentist, and he very much believes in stuff. So he does like ozone, he removes the amalgam with like an amalgam extractor. You know, Dr. Richard, he does like vitamin infusions as part of like when he does like his implant treatments and stuff like that. And I have to say that like, I still believe traditional medicine is needed.
Totally.
And I think, you know, I had a friend of mine that also was in Mexico, and she was like, oh, I've got a wisdom tooth pain, and I tried putting cloves on it and it didn't get better. And obviously she did need antibiotics, but I do think it's the integration of, you know, that functional medicine with modern day medicine, which is really important. What's your thoughts on it?
It's a difficult one.
Tell me.
Because look, you can make a good or bad story up about anything, right? Because what's the alternative to amalgam in composite, right? It's a plastic. And, you know, plastics in your mouth all the time, the free plastics that you get from the bonds. You can make a bad story up about that too. Yeah, you can do research and find out how much problems that causes. I mean, I'm interested in why you thought that dance was the answer, when, you know, doctors are telling you, you know,
otherwise. But I think it's the functional piece as well that helped her, because that led her to people that said to her, like, you know, it starts from within. Like if you've read books, like I'm sure we've discussed this, The Body Keeps the Score, or The Body Says No. It's all about that stuff, because all of these physical diseases, 6 months ago I slipped my disc, he knows I was in here, I tried to ignore it, it was 100% because of what was going on mentally in my mind. Like, yeah, okay, fine, I actually physically fell in the gym, but my mind was somewhere else, and all this stress had been building up, and then it was like crash.
Totally.
And I was like, that's not a coincidence that I slipped my disc, you know.
Totally.
So I think that, like, you know, you understanding that is so important. And for me, I'm hearing that like the movement was freedom.
Yeah.
But do you think then as well, there's like something that you're doing can be integrated into mainstream medicine?
Well, yes, I would love to be able to have this available on the NHS. The red tape, however, who knows? You know, we will need to get it to a point of clinical trials, which is doable with the right backing and with the right funding. But clinical trials cost money, but that's when we'll be able to see the different chemical releases, you know, during a session for each person, the way that the brain waves move, etc. Because I've got my theories on it. I know what I believe makes sense for this work. And also I have done so much research now. I just don't have the piece of paper. However, I'm also not ignorant to the fact that the pieces of paper are important. And so I partnered with a neuroscientist on this work who has, you know, 15 years in chronic pain, and she works specifically on understanding the mind-body connection, and she's a really interesting person. But the way in which she came to me, I mean, it was only from God at this point. Like she did my method for 6 months. So she'd been following my journey. She'd been following me online. I put this out when I first started. It was a case study. It was a theory. It was like, I believe this works. It's worked for me, but I can't charge people for this because I don't, you know, I need to see if it works for other people. So I did it for free, and then I upped it to donations, but people were just coming for free. I was teaching it 5 times a week on Zoom. She was one of those people. She did it for 6 months. I don't know who people are when they come. Just similarly to if you go to a gym class, you don't know who people are in that gym class, what they do, etc. We don't talk about that. You're there to move and then you leave. So similar concept with this. So when she told me, I then basically put a call out to medical professionals via Instagram, because I was like, we're starting to get some good traction here. Like, there's press coming. I want to make sure that I'm not a bit delusional, and I want to have some medical professionals that really do believe in what I'm talking about. So I asked people, where I had pharmacologists get in touch, I had therapists, I had doctors, I had various types of people get in touch and say, yep, if you want to put my name on your kind of backing, then I'm for it. And she was one of those people. And so when I read the email and it said neuroscientist, I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is what I need to do. I need to partner with this neuroscientist. And only 10 minutes before, I'd been having a conversation with my assistant at the time to say to her, I need to find a neuroscientist to back this body of work, like, for sure. 10 minutes later, Dawn shows up. So she's written out from a neuroscientific perspective what happens in a session, and therefore what she believes happens, especially even in regards to chemical release, acetylcholine and serotonin release, and even dopamine, and understanding those kind of chemicals. Now, to have the actual proof that works, we would need to go clinical. And that's just financial at this point.
There's a few things about what you're saying. I mean, in the scientific world, often the breakthrough happens 20 years before
Totally.
the general sort of acceptance of it, because you do a clinical trial, no one's still going to accept that.
100%.
Yeah, you need multi-center clinical trials from all over the world, with the blind clinical trials, this, that, and the other. But if you're 100% sure of it within yourself, then the challenge to spreading this story, to me, is more a marketing challenge than a clinical one.
100%, because like I said before, it was about me making sure that it wasn't just working on me, right? And then so when I started to see that it was working on people with diagnoses from autoimmune to cancer to PTSD.
Exercise, right? I mean,
of course,
people accept exercise is good for you.
Yeah,
and this is exercise, right?
Absolutely.
But I did your TED as in your TED talk. I was.
Did you get up and do it? He messaged me going like, "Can we do the movement tomorrow?" I was like, "Sure."
It was like midnight last night. What I looked like.
And he's like dancing.
But the thing that was for me was amazing about it was dancing for me doesn't come naturally at all. I mean, you come from a music background. For me, I was a raver in the 90s.
Yeah, then you are.
But the closing your eyes piece was really the important thing, where you're just free.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, some people can just be free with their eyes open. I can't. Even if there's no one in the room, I just find this awkward, But the sort of the almost the meditation part of it was really interesting. So tell me about that, the link from the actual exercise to the mind.
So there's two components to the method, and the reason why it works is the following. Your peripheral nervous system is essentially a sensory and motor system. So it's governed by senses and movement, and that's essentially what keeps us alive as well. And it also allows us to create a perception of the world. So when we do the method, and the reason that we close the eyes is because as soon as you close your eyes, your other senses heighten. And the senses that we're looking for to heighten are sound and also touch. And so when we heighten those other senses, your internal world is going to tell you where you're feeling uncomfortable, perhaps have tension, maybe you're holding on to something emotional. And just by creating the awareness, you can then move it. And the key aspect as to why this works, so you just said you're a raver in the 90s, then you can dance, because we're not doing choreography. If you put me into a dance class right now, I'd be the worst person in there. I can't be told how to move. But I can move. I have rhythm. That is the key component to this. It's allowing people to go back into their natural instinct, which is finding the rhythm.
And you think everyone has that?
Yeah, they've done studies on babies. So there's loads of studies on babies.
And the indigenous thing.
Oh yeah, totally.
That almost every single, every single sort of culture has it. Right?
Exactly.
Dance as part of it.
It's natural. And what we do is, the ego is the stories, right? The ego is, oh, I look stupid, and oh no, I can't dance, and all the stories. if you just look at a baby, that baby will just move to music without any care in the world.
It's quite amazing when you see that.
And that is what we have naturally inbuilt into us, but we've basically forgotten it because we're so in our heads. So the methodology is so centered around getting people back into their natural rhythm. And when you're in your natural rhythm, you're going to then move your body naturally without any kind of block or resistance. And that in turn is going to allow you to process what is really going on in your mind. Because remember, the body is essentially the reflection of your subconscious. That's really what they've discovered. That's the mind-body connection. That's also where we use the word psychosomatic. You know, when somebody comes and presents with all these symptoms and doctors are like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. It's like, it's in the mind, but it doesn't mean it's not physically happening.
Yeah, and I hate that. Mm-hmm. That's why I talk about medical gaslighting so often, like talk payment about this, where, as I said, they can't see the physical symptoms. They're like, you're fine, it's in your head, you know. And you know, we had a podcast recently where someone said, you know, about that expression as well, like, I was in my head, you know, like it's you know, it's such a profound statement. And I think the indigenous piece, like you said, and when you go, because I spend a lot of time in South America and these countries, and I find it really healing being around indigenous people that really connect with their own culture. I recently went to a retreat in Costa Rica, in a place called Brave Earth. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like a really healing ground. They do a lot of ceremonies there, but we were there for a retreat. I was with my partner. And there, it was called Activating the Voice, which is a different, but so similar to what you're doing. So it wasn't necessarily, so it was about activating your voice, because there were like singing lessons. And by the way, I'm totally tone deaf. I like cannot sing. But it was also about activating your voice instead of like finding your voice in like difficult situations. But what I found really fascinating is one of the exercises of the day was, think of a song that you know from your childhood which is related to your like culture. So I suppose like an Iranian whatever for you, like Egyptian. I couldn't think of one song. And a lot of the South American people did like think of some songs. And then there was one guy, he was actually from like a little place near Cuba, and he remembered a song, and he actually Googled what the song was, and they had been singing as a childhood. And in the song, it was actually, he had no idea, but it was linked to the ancestors that were shipped over from the slave trade. And as part of torment, they had to pick up like a really hot stone and pass it around. And if they dropped it, they get shot. This is the slaves. Wow. And he got really emotional because as a child, when he sang it, he didn't know. It was a bit like ring a rosies, a pocket full of,
it's like the plague.
It's about the plague. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? And like these things are like born out of something. But what I'm trying to say is there's such depth in, as I said, like these songs and these movements that relates to ancestors, which is actually so important, like to who we are now.
100%. I mean, the drum is the most instrument in the world. It falls across every culture because it was used in war. And so when we were all, when the British were out colonising everything, you know, drum was as part of every single war that existed. So when we're talking about ancestral, we do recognise the drum. And also they've linked the drum as well to our heartbeat. So the music that we play in Movement is Medicine, I've basically just modernised this concept where we use house music, we use drum and bass, we use reggae, we use music that has got percussion. Because that is the easiest way to connect people back into their body. It's that simple because of the percussion is such a felt instrument. Whereas if you're listening to, I don't know, even like a saxophone, it's much more emotive, but you feel it in a different kind of way. It's not necessarily going to affect the way your body's moving. So with that in mind, like, it's all just been about like kind of modernizing this work as best as possible, because there's no doubt in my mind it works. There's just no doubt in my mind. This is so inherently in every single person. It's just about activating it for them in a slightly different capacity. And like you say, the marketing and the language. Like when I first started doing this, I was using words like trauma and healing, and I don't use any of that anymore because I don't think it attracts as many people when you use that language. It's not to say that...
And you think it does, don't you?
You think it does,
but it
doesn't.
Because when you've done your own work, and I think it's the thing, when you've done your own work, you're like, I'm going to attract the same people that want to be healed.
Listen, just on this pod, these words have become normalised to me.
Yeah,
But
see?
a year ago,
Yeah.
you used to talk about trauma and all that. I was like, what the hell is she talking
Yeah,
about?
exactly. And he was like, babes, you're so damaged. I was like, I'm not, you know? He literally like damaged goods. I'm like, I'm not, because unlike, because you think Ems, and like, that's why we connected. It's like, because when you've done the work, these words, like even I've now been introduced to like ancestral trauma. Do you know what that means? Like that's literally like your ancestors passing down stuff in their literal DNA, you know, like that's a huge thing. Epigenetics, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a massive thing. You can even get it on like 23andMe or something like that, you know, and it's kind of shoved under the carpet, but it's massively a thing. So it's funny, but I think you isolate people, like as you said, and there's like, Payman knows as well, there's been a few dentists that have been like, oh, not sure if Rhona can talk about mental health because she's like been through her mental health. And I'm like, yeah, and I literally like actually screenshotted it on my stories, and hundreds of people were like, that makes you the biggest advocate.
Exactly.
That makes you the biggest advocate, because it's like saying
it's
like saying to someone, you can't talk about a recession because you've not been through a recession, because you have been through a recession. You know what I mean? It's just kind of crazy. But
take us through the initial journey of the first class. What happens?
So everyone is seated for the first half an hour. The music is at a tempo of anything under like 125 BPM. So from the off, you basically I get everyone to put their hands over their heart and just start to tap and move. They get the instructions that the two rules that we have with movement as medicine is that you have to keep your eyes closed, like you saw. Yeah. And then the other one is don't stop moving. And the reason that we don't stop moving is because if somebody freezes because they feel something uncomfortable, well then guess what? It's staying.
Blockage.
Yeah, you're staying in it. You're staying in the uncomfortability. Yeah. If you're constantly moving, which is why the music is so specific, then whatever feeling comes to the surface, you will move it. And so when we're working with the body, we work from the feet all the way up to the top of the head. And there's a lot of science that goes into this as well, a lot of anatomy. So for example, the bottoms of the feet covered in thousands of nerve endings. If you're stuck in your head, touch your feet. Simple as that, because it will awaken your nervous system to realize that you're present. And when you're present and you're present in your body, that's your anchor. That's the moment to know, oh, look, I'm safe actually. Because when we go into these responses, when we go into fight or flight or even freeze, when we're in overwhelm, it's just a signal to be like, we're not safe. So all you have to do is remind yourself that you're safe. So the easiest way to do that is by working with your physical body, because your body is always present. So start at the feet and then we work our way up. And so we go even to like the backs of the knees, a place that no one touches. When was the last time you sat there and like touched the backs of your knees intentionally? The reason being is because we've got loads of lymph nodes in the backs of the knees, and the lymph is literally all it's needed to work well is a bit of movement and a bit of touch. That's it. And it just shows
music's playing and you're sort of guiding.
We're going to have to try it. We are going to try it.
Yeah, I'm guiding this
whole process. Can we have a guided bit and like a little bit? Yeah. Let's do it, Pay. What kind of music do you like? Oh no, Emma has to decide.
Techno.
Yeah.
Question for you then. How does this differ to ecstatic dance? Do you know about ecstatic dance?
No.
Emma can explain, but she can talk.
So this is one of the terminologies that I don't use.
Okay.
And
only because
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. So ecstatic dance and that kind of community, it's just based on the fact of the more ancestral tribal kind of cultural aspect of the fact that dance can be used for healing. It's like sober raving, right? And it works for people. It's got a beautiful community, etc. We don't have necessarily the same ethos as ecstatic dance because of the first bit. The first bit is the real solid like moment of the method. Every single part of that method is taken from science. There's data to back it as to why we're doing it. I also tell people why we're doing it as we move through it. So that they can take it away and use it in daily life. Now, ecstatic dance, you go to an ecstatic dance class, you'll just be told to get up and start dancing. So like you just said, oh, I feel a bit awkward and, you know, that kind of thing. And your I guess your role or your job in ecstatic dance is to break through feeling uncomfortable and just get on with it. We take away the aspects of feeling uncomfortable by putting people into their physical body so deeply that by the time their eyes are open and that they stand up and we go into the dance segment, They don't care. They don't care who's in the room. They're just there feeling connected, feeling free. If they also want to continue to shut their eyes, they shut their eyes. And there's always this like there's a really funny episode of Peep Show that people
love. Show.
Peep Show,
so good.
When he takes Mark to Rainbow Rhythm, so that's ecstatic dance, and they get people to go up to each other.
Have you seen that one?
Remember.
You kind of do these like movements, but you're really like this.
Yeah.
And then like, can you imagine like my fiance, like in Costa Rica, it was the first time, but he's so open, like he was so amazing on the retreat. But I felt like a bit awkward because they do this kind of like, you're like this, imagine me doing this, like, and like I'm a sober dancer, like I'm a sober raver, you know that, but I'm never going to be like this. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
we don't do any of that.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, it's what we encourage is, for example, when you're stressed, you naturally make your body small. So it affects your posture because your muscles are going to contract, and especially as well your hips and your lower back, and then that affects the rest of your spine. So what we do is get people to do opening exercises, again, all actually backed by science, to really stretch out and open their bodies up. So even when they're standing up and they're moving and they're dancing, they're going to naturally I'm not telling them how to move. They're moving now however they want to move. Some people it might just be a little and for other people it might just be a little two-step. There's no rules. But what I'm kind of guiding people to do is like make your body big, and like, the more you move, the more you release, the like it's that kind of just freedom in letting yourself go like you would at a rave or a festival, which is where I got so much inspiration for this, because even though hedonism is rife within that culture, like if you go to certain raves and you go to certain festivals and you're not focusing on the hedonism and you're just focusing on like look at the joy, you don't drink or anything, like that's just your life. It's not any different to you, and you're not somebody that can go to these things and just be like, well, I'm not having a good time. You're there to connect to the music, and you will move and dance as you will,
and also to each other, right?
Each other.
It's the closest I've ever felt to being part of a tribe.
There we go.
Right?
Like when you're out with your mates, you mean, and
back then in the 90s.
Yeah, lol.
6 a.m.
Yeah, of course.
Totally. But this comes back to polyvagal theory. So polyvagal theory is this component of like, how do we build safety and resilience within the nervous system? It's written by this guy called Stephen Porges, and it's just such an amazing body of work because he looks at the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is such a huge thing now in mental health. But the vagus nerve, one of the components of building this like connection and safety is by doing things in a group. So one of the things that we want to do when we're anxious and depressed and low is hide. Like I know as well for me
too.
even now, I get to points where I get very stressed and overwhelmed, and my default is anxiety. And I know what's happening on a logical level, but there's still elements to me that's just like, ugh, and I hide. And then as soon as I go out and as soon as I have a dance and as soon as I see my people, I'm fine. Like it's like night and day.
Yeah, like sometimes you actually like, oh, I really don't want to go out. And when you force yourself to do it and you're like, I'm really glad I did. It's a bit like therapy.
Yeah. Yes.
Like you sometimes like tonight I'm like, oh my God, I've got therapy tonight. I'm so tired. I just want to sleep. But like, don't cancel. Because when you've had therapy, you'll feel so much better, you know?
Totally. And it's the same thing with this.
Do you do therapy as well?
I don't do therapy anymore. I've had a lot of therapy.
See, my tribe, my peoples.
Yeah, necessarily. I've had a lot of therapy with different kinds of therapists. I've had everything from EMDR through to counselling, through to hypnotherapy, through to talk therapy, like standard CBT talk therapy. I think it's absolutely got its place. I think it's so important for people to understand like a level of awareness in how they feel. What I will say though is that I think that it necessarily needs to exist alongside something to actually physically release. I think that those two things are super important to coexist between each other. You can't always talk your way out of a feeling. You can intellectualize a feeling and understand why it happened and where it came from, but you can't always move that feeling.
So true.
That's why the two things need to coexist. And so that's also for me, like, I was so sick of talking about what happened to me. You know, I went to this therapist and that therapist, and then I'm repeating the story, and I just get to a point where I'm like, I can't talk about this anymore. I need to just release it. And that was also a huge, part of my work for me and why I needed to do it. It was about me releasing these very difficult and very traumatic experiences that had changed me. But I didn't want it to change me for the worse. I didn't want to end up this anxious, afraid of the world, human being, which I easily could have gone into that realm. because it was very extreme what happened to me. And it was also, medical trauma is a very interesting type of trauma, because medical trauma is essentially done by people that you're meant to trust, and these doctors that you're being completely vulnerable to. And, you know, I'm not trying to demonize doctors at all. It's just that with that type of trauma, it's such a complex thing of having to unpack, because you are literally giving your whole body to somebody and trusting that they're going to do the right thing or do their job properly. And for whatever reason, I just had a whole myriad of like failures that ended up and resulted in me, you know, nearly losing my life. And like that kind of thing to have to process just by talking about it. Like even now I can feel myself. I'm getting emotional internally. I can feel it. And it's like, I can't keep talking about it. You know, talking about it's not going to help me process it and move forward, because I don't want to be stuck there for the rest of my life.
But in the past, and that's the thing, because I was speaking to someone recently and they were like, you know what, like I don't know about how unpacking the past will actually help, because we can all like delve. And as you said, we can go as far as epigenetics. Like I'm so traumatized because like my ancestors were this, or I come from like war-inflicted countries. But it gives you an understanding, so I think it's important. But like you said, it doesn't necessarily help process the present. And that's the thing. The present is one of the most important things to be in. And we all know from so many philosophers that our state of happiness is being in that present moment. And I think you're right, this changing your physiological state is really important. And I think the most dangerous thing now is that when people get more anxious, they get on the phone, which then gets more anxiety. And then they continue to scroll, and that creates even more anxiety. And they actually don't want to move. And like you said, just putting it down and either moving or like going to meet friends can just make such a huge difference.
Did you see your Mexico experience as a positive one or a negative one?
In the hospital?
Yeah. Because it didn't work.
It didn't work, no. I would say it was a necessary experience rather than positive or negative, because it was like, okay, I've been in Western medicine, right?
Yeah.
And that didn't work. I've now gone into functional medicine, searching for all the answers. That didn't work. It allowed me to understand how much we pedestal people and look outside for the answers.
So true.
All the time. And then the levels of like disappointment and, you know, even just pain, where it's like, oh my God, you've made it worse. Like, what? How has this happened? And on top of that, paid a lot of money, you know, so much money. This is the side of illness that people don't really discuss very often, because we don't tend to talk about money. But I lost everything. Like I nearly went bankrupt, you know, and I had a really successful career. And so I've been having to rebuild from then. And these kind of things, they also have an impact on your mental health. Like going from somebody who is stable, who's okay, to somebody that now is having to speak to like debt collectors. And, you know, there was just so many aspects to how much this changed my life. And so I wouldn't say it was positive or negative. I would just say it was necessary for me to reframe how much I was putting my health into other people and their hands. Where in turn, it was a case of actually, what can I do? What can I actually do for myself?
Take the matter into your own hands.
How can I feel a bit more empowered?
And then did you take care of all the other stuff as well? Nutrition, rest?
Oh, totally.
Sleep?
Yeah. I mean, I would also say that at some points it probably went to a bit of an extreme.
Really? In
Yeah.
what way?
So there's a rise of orthorexia. I don't know if you've heard.
Yeah, of course.
about
I
this.
think I have. I think I had orthorexia.
So did I.
What's that?
When you you're obsessed with being so healthy. So you think that all of the choices that you make are really healthy. You get really defensive when people question you, because everything's like in the name of health. So for example, you're obsessed with like calorie counting, eating zero sugar, eating zero fat, also over exercising. And you also justify all of your health reasons because you're so healthy, and everyone else is a bit jealous because you are in such a space of control and no one else can be that. My body is my temple kind of energy. But it's actually it's an unhealthy way to mask addiction.
Yeah. And it's like you just said there, it's a complete coping mechanism for control. How can I make as much control in my life as possible?
It's like anorexia, but with exercise and
not as far, like you're not completely depriving your body, but you're
doing the opposite.
You're doing the opposite, but you're like, I'm only going to eat like...
No, but in so much as anorexia is a control mechanism.
Absolutely,
So it's not about what you look like either. It's very much about what you're putting
your
into
body.
yourself.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a case of, like, you know, tiniest bit of gluten, I'd freak out, and like going into supermarkets and checking every label, and
organic and this and that.
It's just a lot of
And it's
fear
toxic.
mongering. Yeah, so much
Is that
fear
quite
mongering.
common these days? Must be.
Very.
Yeah, I think
Very.
I think that like that toxic narrative, like it really upsets me now. My mum called me the other day to tell me that she saw my ex, and I was like, great. Do you know what I mean? To tell me how like wonderful he looked with his new wife. I was like, thanks mum, classic my mum. She's entertaining, like my mum needs her own show. Anyway, and it turns out my mum was like, oh, you know, they're so controlled. Like, apparently they don't eat dinner every night and they go to bed and the last meal's at 6 p.m. and they go to bed every night at 10 and all this stuff. It's the same as that guy, actually, Stephen Bartlett had on. Did you see the guy that was like attempting to be the youngest man in the world? Did you see that? And he got his son's blood injected into his body. Have you not seen it? He's this multi-billionaire.
I'm so anti him.
Yeah, so he's this multi-billionaire, and what happened is that so he got his blood like PRP, got it injected. He wakes up every day at 5 a.m. His last meal of the day is at 11 a.m. He then has like 1,000,001 like IV boosts and everything.
He's trying to reverse aging.
Yeah, but he also looks really old, ironically.
I saw the clip.
Yeah, exactly.
But the issue, right, he's a great example of somebody with a severe mental health condition who is promoting it under the guise of health because he's got
under
loads
the
of money.
guise of health, yeah.
It's like, none of this behavior is healthy. And actually, when Stephen was talking to him about his story, he literally says, like, my dad got sick and, you know, I want to keep my dad alive and I'm trying to figure it out for my dad. And it's like, that's the issue then.
Yeah.
That's clearly the problem. It's not the fact that you want to live forever, because also life is not about living
finite,
forever.
yeah.
That's the purpose of being a human. You come, you do your you do your time and then you go. And so having this person that is under the guise of, I'm doing something for the benefit of health. No, you're not. Plus, his protocol is like $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
So who are you benefiting? Because you're not benefiting the poor. You're not. This is a big thing for me. It's the ideologies that exist within the wellness industry, where it's like, yeah, be healthy for X amount of money, and it's like, okay, so we're really making health now a class system. That's really what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that is such a problem in the wellness space.
So the thing is, I've got a couple of comments on that, right? We are undergoing at the moment an NHS crisis.
Yes.
Like there is literally like a pandemic within the healthcare system, and that's because the system is flawed. But my issue is that although there are so many tools that are free and available, number one, they're not promoted, but number two, there is a massive issue and massive obstacles for people, right? So for example, Payman knows very well with dentistry, okay? There's a huge issue. A lot of dental diseases are preventable, but people don't know how to brush their teeth, they don't know how to floss, and they don't know what to buy or what to eat. Now, it's all very well, we can provide those tools, and I'm sure it would make a difference, but we're also completely ignoring the socioeconomic status of people in this country. If you've got a woman who has 5 children from 5 different partners, who's, you know, on the welfare system, and she cannot keep her kids quiet, who probably have ADHD and another plethora of health issues, you know, telling her that she shouldn't smoke, it's probably the only thing she wants to do, and going downstairs and getting a McDonald's and a pack of fags, it's much easier for her than, you know, to post something or to make easy health choices. Don't be like that. Don't be classist.
No, it's a bit what's the word? Not judgmental, but like you know, the what you're saying is all well and good. Yeah.
But we have to make it easier for them. We cannot assume that they've got these choices.
It's all. But look, the choice that you're talking about. Put one song on a day. Yeah. Everyone's got a phone.
This is education.
Yeah.
This is the key, because so my whole business model is built on education. So when people understand why it works, they do the how.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they don't do it. It's all well and good. We know that smoking is not good for you.
Of course we know.
But yeah, everyone's still smoking.
And eating McDonald's.
Yeah, we're still doing it. If you're actually somebody that's looked into...
Yeah, you do.
But if you're somebody that's actually looked into certain things or studies or whatever it is, and you start to understand why something is good or bad or what they found, etc., you're more likely to either do it or not do it. Now, for example, for me, I'll use gluten as an example, right? When I went through this whole like, I'm going to be so healthy and I can't eat any gluten and whatever, when I got so fed up and realised that the orthorexia tendencies were probably there, and I went kind of the reverse, I was like, I'm eating all the gluten ever. All I'm eating is pizza.
Give me bread.
Yeah, bread every day. And I ended up feeling terrible because I definitely don't do very well with gluten.
Yeah.
Like, it's that simple. They tested me for celiac recently just to see. So I think that when you kind of go through this, like, it's like a roundabout, you're just like, oh, is it this, is it that, is it this, is it that, and you try and find like your balance within all of this stuff of taking it back into a space of empowerment where you're making the choice for yourself, rather than, if a practitioner told me, which they did at one point, you can't eat any of these foods, what do I want to do? I want to go and eat the foods that they've told me I can't eat, 100%.
But the thing is that, like, payment, when they were talking about, because I spoke to many TV channels in the summer about when it was like suddenly the doors were closed on children on the NHS, as in like kids couldn't get an NHS appointment. And there was a huge debate, I think it was with BBC, and the debate was, is it the parents' fault? Basically, you know, with the child that's like developing all these cavities. And it was really sad because I think it was quite remarkable to see that so many parents didn't actually have a basic knowledge. And some of them, as I said, because of their socioeconomic status, and they have this screaming child, will put a bottle with Coke in their children's bottle. And I'm not saying, but like, who are we to judge? We don't know their circumstances.
I get it.
Do you know what I mean?
Of course I get it.
Fine. Great. I'm glad.
But I don't know, a little bit condescending, man. The important bit of education with sugar, interestingly, we haven't managed to get out there.
Totally.
Yeah,
Jamie Oliver tried.
What is it? What is it? It's not to do with the amount. I mean,
It's to do with frequency.
People don't know this. It's to do with the frequency.
Totally.
Yeah. So in dental terms, you could have a gigantic amount of sugar in one go. Is fine compared to tiny amounts every day, every 10 minutes.
Every 10 minutes.
Got you. Yeah.
So that bit of information we haven't, as a profession, managed to get out there.
Yeah, but I still think I am not being condescending. I'm actually being empathetic to people's situation. And what I'm trying to say
I get it.
yeah, fine. We argue a lot on this, by the way.
And people get it.
Yeah. But Emma, obviously it's wonderful that you created this method, but I want to know a little bit about any mental health struggles on the way of creating this business. You talked to us about going from basically bankruptcy, where you're working in the music industry, investing everything into your health, then building the Movement is Medicine method. What mental health hurdles then did you have when you had the actual business?
I also get a feeling you're not 100% comfortable in the business space.
No, I'm not.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How did you know that?
You just feel it.
Yeah. No, I struggle with business. I put out a video a few days ago saying...
maybe that's why.
Saying how much I struggle with it, because I really am good at creative and ideas and making this happen and figuring out how to, like you said about marketing, like what's the language we need to use to get this person, like what's the psychology around getting this person through the door. And I'm really good at all of that. I'm really good at creating decks and making things look nice and whatever else. I'm also really good at researching, and I'm really good at making science sound easy. It's something that I taught myself when I was ill. It's like, how do you translate this into layman's terms? So I'm really good at all of that. And then I'm good at, creating the content around that so that people can understand it. Business and having to make all the decisions, having to do budgets, having to figure out...
I hate it.
I just really,
you're
really
very
struggle.
You're very creative. But she doesn't seem to have any guilt around the business, which I kind of feel like...
What do you mean, guilt?
I feel guilt.
What do you mean guilt, though?
I think it's because, as well, I'm in this zone at the moment of... One of the things that's been really challenging has been separating me from the brand, because I am the face of the brand. It's like...
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, it's really similar. But at the same time as well, Chelsea Dental, it's yours. But at the same time, you also have all these other projects. I just have Movement is Medicine right now. And it's not to say I don't want to go on to do other things, because I do. I've got all these ideas about how I want to build things out. However, at the moment, everything goes into this business because I believe in it so much. And it's my passion. It's my baby. It's everything. But what I've struggled the most with is finding the balance between the business and the actual vision. And I have done this on my own. So when I started as well, I call it shiny magpie syndrome. So when people get really excited by shiny things and they're like, oh my God, it's really exciting. People lie, they lie. They tell you, oh, I can do this and I can do that. And I can,
She's been burnt.
So many times, beyond.
By partners or employees?
No, employees, yeah.
But that's just the nature of it.
No, it's been really extreme. But it's been really extreme. It's not just been somebody not really doing their job. It's been fraud.
Money.
Yeah, somebody really came in and there was a fraud situation. I had, on the week of my TED Talk, the assistant that I've been working with for a year ghosted for no reason other than the fact that she'd done no work, with no explanation. I had to get somebody on really quickly to come and kind of wipe it all up, and it was just the wrong person. It just got worse and worse and worse. So when you have a business that the ideas are all solid and the ideas are all there, but structurally there's no foundation, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
You know that,
If you talk to
Payman.
any business owner,
okay, so I'm gonna chime in. First of all, and trust me, it's an ongoing process, and I think that one of the reasons why I feel really passionate. I used to say I had a lot of people that I looked up to. Now, unfortunately, in dentistry, despite the fact there are a lot of females, there is not a lot of female-led stuff within dentistry. And I hate to admit it, but I'm going to say it, that most of my role models in dentistry were men. Mm-hmm. So there were certain men, like Christian Coachman was up there, Miguel Stanley. This was 12, 15 years ago. These are huge names in the industry. This was literally about 12 years ago. And I was like, how did they did it? And what I loved about them is their connection with their audiences and their connections with human beings. And I very much was like, oh, you know what? I don't get why people make such a big deal about women in business, or I think it's fine. I think if you show your value and you go into a boardroom or a situation, you can do the same for yourself. Payman knew me when I was a baby. I literally was 1 or 2 years graduated. And he also knows, because I met him on a course, I wasn't actually the most clinically gifted person in the world. And he loves a clinically gifted person. He does. But I drove home with him that day because we lived near each other. And I was like, how do I make it? How do I do this stuff? And, we exchanged ideas, and I definitely manifested the position I was in, because what happened is that I was working in a bad NHS practice, and then I CV dropped in all these other practices. And then I took on Chelsea, which had changed hands 5 times. And then I bought Chelsea and completed a week before national lockdown. And what I'm trying to say is that I always feel like there's one obstacle out of the other. Yeah. The difficulty was, obviously, you build a team, but people come and go. And I think that's one of the most difficult things for me, is that I've been extremely loyal. And what I recognize is that people are transient. There are some that stay for a while and some that don't. And I think that's the most difficult thing, because you sometimes feel...
It's early days. Yeah, early days is like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And the thing is that you also have to accept, as you know, through your own healing journey, the only thing that we can guarantee for definite is that nothing is permanent. No. Nothing is permanent. And I think that's a blessing and a curse, because sometimes you want to be cruising with the same team for ages, but sometimes they have to move with you. And unfortunately, in the last couple of years, I've also recognized my role with it as a female within the industry that's kind of taken me aback. And I was like, wow, it is real. The things that people talk about that happen to women, it's true.
Do you think being a woman is being part of this?
As a business owner right now, I don't know. I can't say yes or no, because I don't feel that there's been any situation that I can say, yes, this is a good example of where I felt blocked as a woman. However, in the music industry, 100%.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the music industry.
Glass ceilings beyond glass ceilings. There are so many different structures in that industry. It's known as a boys' club for a reason. And there are so many different structures within that industry that are built so that women are always going to be kept here.
Give us an example.
I mean, you look at any kind of person in a leadership position in a global record label or booking agency, they're going to be a man. There's very few women in global leadership positions in the music industry. And the ones that are they've really had to pave the way. And I was actually very fortunate in one of my jobs. I worked in a very female-heavy booking agency. And the experience was definitely, I would say, easier, because the person in charge of that whole office is one of the greatest agents in the world. And she's a woman. And so it's a very, very diverse makeup of men and women in that agency. You walk into other agencies, no way. It's like 90% men. And obviously,
and what does it mean? Does that mean that the business itself is kind of testosterone driven?
yeah, I think it's just.
Are you saying actually people would hold you back because you're a woman?
I think that there's maybe internal bias that people have, whether or not they believe in it or not, or are aware of it or not. I think that there's an internal bias of a woman can only get to this point. I think that really does exist. And I think that, this comes also from recognizing traditional roles, like the nature and the notion of women in business and leadership positions is a very new concept. I
do think it's been overdone though, I do think as well, we've, again, new words for you, dictionary out, the female and the masculine energy as well, I think is something that women are also hyper focused on really kind of embracing the masculine energy, which I think is important in some circumstances, but also being in your feminine sometimes is not a bad thing either.
It has to be balanced.
And do you know what I mean by this? Or is this gaga stuff to you? But
I get that.
for example,
as in to succeed being a woman, you have to act like a man.
No, not really. There's a female masculine energy. So some behaviors that women now project are very masculine, archetypal masculine energies. And some would
and you're
say
saying that's bad.
I think it's bad in some circumstances, and I actually think it can make you ill. I think it made me ill. I think it burnt me out because I was so obsessed with being this CEO figure, like this, in control, a little bit bolshy. Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, it drove me to a certain extent, lol. It drove me to a certain extent, but then it burnt me out. And sometimes, when I'm at home now with my partner, oh my God, I just love it when he takes control. I'm like,
you
whatever.
can surrender.
I just want to surrender into what we call a more feminine sort of energy, which is totally fine with me. Look after me. I'm cool. I'm cool. Look after me,
I'm going to say now, that is what I've struggled with. What she's just described there in business, that is exactly what I've struggled with, where I don't have a business partner. It's just me. So I am the face, the voice, the marketing, the socials, the researcher, the curriculum builder, the teacher. I'm everything. And I don't have that other person there to just be like, can you just take this? Because, and that traditionally even...
But I'm not sure that's to do with being a woman.
No, I think that's just to do with...
Because I don't think I could do a business by myself.
Yeah.
I think that's just to do with the nature of what we need as people, which brings us back to the community aspect, which we don't really have as much.
There are some people that are the opposite, yeah? I don't know, in Chelsea, would you want a partner?
No, but I often get told that I don't... I got told recently, even there's maybe you should step down from being a director at Chelsea just because you are really good at podcasts and doing all the creative stuff. And I was like, I built this brand on my own, and I struggle to assert authority, because I really do struggle to assert authority within the business space. And the thing is as well, because I'm an empath, I take everyone's energy constantly, so I'm drained by the end of the week.
Hey, Emma, it's really early days.
It is
really early days. You have no idea how early it is.
No, I do. I do.
And what it is, the rhythm and the processes kind of work themselves out around the person you are.
Yeah.
The fact that they haven't fully worked themselves out is because
well, they have now. This is what I will say.
Business,
totally. It's a very young business. And the thing is, I think that we all need mentors, right? We all need people that are in a much more advanced position than us that can just be, and if you take the guidance or not, it doesn't matter. There's somebody that I haven't had one. I've not really had any mentorship for the business. I've had mentorship for my health and my research and all of that kind of stuff. Definitely. For the business aspect, I'm still on the hunt for a mentor figure. And recently, this is where I put this video out where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it on my own. And then since I put that video out, it was a bit like exposure therapy, because I'm a big believer in exposure therapy.
Me too.
Yeah, big exposure. It could be anything. It's if you have a fear around this thing, go and do the thing, because then you'll break through your fear. And I had a massive block with social media, because when you're in a position where you're helping people can become problematic for various reasons.
Codependent.
We can use that word, but also more so delusional.
Love it.
Yeah, I would say delusional is probably the better word to use, because they make a personality for you, you know. And I've had really serious incidences with people that are, you know, they're mentally not very well. And given the nature of my work, there's a level of understanding as to what's happening, but it's also, with all due respect, it's not my problem. You need to go and get professional help. I'm teaching a class, and if you can either take part or not take part, I'm not going to solve your trauma.
Boundaries.
And huge boundaries necessary for this. But the thing is that this stuff has impacted me in ways that I don't want to speak about publicly, but it's just like, yeah, it's impacted me in a lot of different ways because of the nature of what was being done and said. And so I think that side of it, and not having a partner, both professional and personal, I don't have a partner. So I'm doing it on my own. So when I'm in my flat on my own and I finish teaching and I'm having to deal with another delusional person with nowhere to go with this, it's had a really severe... I've basically developed social anxiety for the first time in my whole life. And this is where it leads back to your original question of like, how has having a business like affected your mental health? I've never had social anxiety. I don't have a problem with people. I love people. I've spent my whole life around loads of people and community structures. When I was younger, I used to be an athlete. I was in and out with different people all the time. Now I'm literally a bit like, oh, who is that and what do they want?
Same.
And I don't like that.
Thing is life humbles you, but these experiences, like, I read a quote the other day that said, my trauma didn't make me stronger, because, you know, they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It goes, it made me more guarded and made me get on. And I was like, that's how I feel. Like, a couple of things have happened to me in the last couple of years. And I'm like, do you know what? Like, I never used to think people have bad intentions. And now I'm like, your intention's pure. And unfortunately, that's what like life has done to me. Question for you as well is, has movement is medicine been explored in schools? I'm sure that there's, great. That's fantastic.
So I am also training. I'm really big on training other people, right? So that's so key to me. I'm one person, right? So I'm sure that you've got your own methods as well, that you're like, oh, if I taught this to more people, then more people would understand my way of working, right? So with this in mind, I'm like, where are the primary school teachers? Where are the teachers? Because if I teach this to a teacher, then that's usable in their whole school, right? And I don't then have to go and do it. But of course, until we get as many people as possible through the door to do this training, and also looking at things like government grants and, you know, other ways in which we can fund this, I do go into schools.
Amazing.
And I do a lot of, for the younger ones, it's just kind of, we just
random
dance around, whatever. But for the older ones, I teach the science and I teach the theory that I teach in businesses. So I go into corporates, I go into companies, and I teach this is what stress is. This is how it affects you in terms of your mind and body, and how to utilize dance and music in your own body to release it. And I teach that in schools, and it usually is very well received, and people, you know, they really do remember it. And I also do these workshops for teachers so that they can then apply that to kids they're working with.
I love that.
You said you haven't got a partner in the business, you haven't got a partner in life. Is that on purpose?
No. I mean, the business partner side of things, I've only just kind of opened myself up to that possibility. Because of all of these ups and downs with the business, I was a bit like, don't trust anyone. I've now got a really beautiful team. I'm really happy with my team. So I'm therefore in a position where I can open myself back up again and being like, right, this is all cool. So let me see. And I've got somebody who I work with. She is just like, she's like my right hand. She just gets me. She understands my vision. So I can also now have somebody that I can talk to and bounce off a bit in regards to that stuff. And in return, in terms of like life, again, illness takes everything. I wasn't with somebody as I was getting ill. You know, I had like kind of non-serious relationships on and off things, but when I got ill, I wasn't with anyone. So that was another element of like, you're doing it alone. And I had my family, but my family as well, you know, they struggled with me being ill.
Emma, thank you so much for being like so open. I think you're such an incredible human being, and it's been such an amazing chat. I could literally chat here for like hours and hours and hours talking to you. If anyone wants to find you online, do you want to tell them your handles?
Yeah, so Emma the Alchemist on Instagram, and then we're also under movementismedicine.uk, and that's also the website.
Okay, that's amazing.
How'd you get to the TED?
TEDx, if you type in Emma Marshall TED Talk, it will come up on YouTube.
I really recommend that.
Thank
I really
you.
recommend that.
Do you like it? But honestly, thank you so much.
for
It's
having
been
me.
such an incredible conversation. And, you know, I'm one of your biggest supporters, and I really recommend, you know, checking her out, moving your body, because it really change your physiological state to change your psychological one. That's
Exactly
what I would
that. Exactly
say.
that.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much,
Thank
Emma.
you.
Take care.